All right, so welcome to our online audience. We've had an on-site audience already gather here for our first Sharing the Dharma Day of the year. We'll start with a guided meditation by Venerable Pema, and then we'll have a teaching by Venerable Sangye Khadro. We'll have a lunch break, and then in the afternoon we'll have a discussion, which is a wonderful way to integrate the teachings. So that's kind of broadly the program for today. We are excited to start a new text called Working with Anger, which I think is much needed, especially at this moment, or maybe just for myself. Maybe everybody else is very calm and happy and all is well. So anyhow, we'll be taking this journey together for however long it takes. So we'll begin by making some prostrations together before we get into the guided meditation. And for folks on site, just follow along if you wish.
Shriye Namo Shriye Namo Shriye Soha Om Namo Manjushriye Namo Shriye Namo Shriye Soha Om Namo Manjushriye Namo Shriye Namo Shriye Soha. Please be seated. Welcome, everyone, and all those online. And thank you for taking time today to be here, using your precious Sunday to be here listening to the teachings of the Buddha. And today we're going to start in this text by Venerable Chodron, Working with Anger. Venerable Chodron is currently traveling in Europe. So Venerable Sangye Khadro, our senior teacher, is going to give the talk. So the format that we're going to be doing is we'll do some prayers and then do the Buddhist mantra. Then outside of motivation, we'll do a brief breathing exercise to bring ourselves here, calm the mind, and whatever that we are doing, you do whatever is comfortable for you as much as you would like. If it's something that is not what you've done before, then you can just observe and see what we do. And if you have questions later, you're welcome to ask any of the residents. Okay, so let's start with the prayer. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Taya taro mune mune maha munaye soha. Taya Chayataro mune mune Mahamunaye soha. 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 Imagined if at this moment, imagine that we are completely free from any fear, anxiety, depression, pain, free of the tears of sorrow. And instead, we have sublime happiness. Each moment of the mind is resting in peace and calm. And this is our potential. This is the treasure inside of all of us. Our mission is to discover this most important treasure in the universe, this treasure of ultimate happiness within us. And at this moment, this treasure is hidden. Like a piece of gold ore. For an ordinary people like us, like me, we see this as just a piece of rock. But in the eyes of the gold expert, there's gold inside there. In the same way, this gold-like treasure inside of us is obscured. Two things obscure this precious treasure inside of us. There's the dirt that adheres to the gold, and there's the impurities that's mixed with the gold. And we can see this dirt as like the abrasive mental states that we have, like anger, jealousy, that pushes involuntarily. And then we have attachment that pulls the mind without any choice from us. And these mental states rob us of our freedom. And when our mind is pulled and pushed like this involuntarily, there is no space for positive states of mind like love and compassion to grow. If instead we remove these mental states, these dirt-like, abrasive mental states, it allows us to see that there is this raw gold that's inside of us. And then if we use techniques to refine this gold, to burn away the impurities, and the result is pure gold. So today we're going to learn about one of these abrasive mental states called anger, so that we can be free of its tyranny, free of the fear that comes when it invades our mind. And so we want to generate this motivation for listening to the teachings later, that to the best of my ability, whatever I'm learning, may it help me not to harm myself and others. May I be able to use it to benefit myself and others. And ultimately, may I be able to use it so that I can awaken this most precious treasure of ultimate happiness within myself and others. And so now we're going to take some time to bring ourselves into this space. By watching our breath. And you can choose to focus on the rise and fall of your belly as you breathe in and out. Or if you are able to notice the air moving out of your nostrils, that's also a place that you can concentrate. And relax the body as much as you can, feeling the support of the ground, the chair. Now slowly relax the mind from the breath. Expand your awareness to the room. So to prepare ourselves for the teachings later on working with anger, we're going to do a little analytical meditation and get to know this thief that comes and steals the peace in our mind. And we do that so that we can identify what it's like, be able to catch it and politely ask it to leave our mind. So bring to mind an experience of anger, and then we'll investigate it. How did this anger affect you? Was your mind peaceful and happy? Or was it disturbed and discontent? Were you able to think clearly and make intelligent decisions? Or did your thinking become confused and irrational? How did it affect you physically? Did you feel calm and relaxed, or agitated and tense? How do you think your anger affected other people who were nearby when you got angry? Or people that you met later while you were still feeling angry? What conclusions can you draw from this reflection? For example, do you think anger is helpful to yourself and to others? Or do you think there are more skillful ways of responding to difficult people and situations? As we come to the conclusion of the meditation, take a moment to observe your mind, and specifically to observe the lack of an anger right now. What does that feel like? Just the lack, the absence of anger. And that the mind possibly is also calmer, more peaceful right now. And that is a mind that is strong. And if you want to, you can imagine this sense of peace and calmness manifest as a ball of light in the center of your chest. And this light spontaneously going out to anyone who right now needs that peace and calm. And we can also imagine when that light touches them, immediately their anxiety melts away, their fear disappears. And physically they relax. How wonderful that would be. You can also imagine this light again going out from our heart and bringing the ability to make intelligent decisions, more choices, having that mental space to look at situations calmly and see what are the options and actions that we can take wisely. And see the strength in the other person as they receive this light. So we'll do the final dedication after the teachings.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha. Now we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Thank you very much, Venerable Pema. And now we have a brief break of about 15 minutes or so. And since we've taken this time to settle the minds, let's keep this space available for people who would like to meditate here and maintain silence in the space. If you'd like to chat, you're very welcome to go out on the deck, get yourself a cup of tea. Yeah, so we can use, downstairs, there's a book nook where you can look at get copies of the book if you're interested. So you're welcome to, explore this space. And you'll hear a gong, and we should be back here 5 minutes before 11 to get ready for Venerable Sangye Khadro's talk. Oh, right, bathrooms. Okay, so there are bathrooms. There's unisex bathrooms. Yeah, one up here and one downstairs. You'll see the men's bathrooms are in the men's wing. If anyone is not familiar with that, just check in with Selden, who is over here, or any of our monks. They can show you where that is. And then downstairs, there are women's bathrooms. Have I forgotten anything else? Yep. All right, so we'll see you in a bit. Hayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye Soha. 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 Hayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaye Soha.
So we usually make 3 bows at the beginning. If you want to do it, you know how to do it, you want to do it, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you can just observe. It's to pay respects to the Buddha. Om Namo Manjushriye Namo Sushriye Namo Uttamashriye Soha. Om Namo Manjushriye Namo Sushriye Namo Uttamashriye Soha. Om Namo Manjushriye Namo Sushriye Namo Uttamashriye Soha. So, good morning, and it's really nice to see all of you here. Are some of you here for the first time? Okay, so welcome and thank you for coming. So this is a monthly event, but we usually have a break over the winter when we're doing our winter retreat. So this is the first one of this year. I think the last one was in November. Last November? It's been quite a while. And we're going to be starting on a new book, although it's not really a new book. It was published originally in 2001, I think, but recently republished last year, new edition. And the title of this book is Working with Anger, which we thought was timely. Anyone feeling angry these days? Once in a while, reading the news. Yeah, so there is kind of a lot of things going on in our country and in the world that can stir up feelings of anger. Also other emotions like worry, anxiety, what's coming, what's going to happen. And like maybe prices will go up, which will affect everybody. I read an article the other day about how Easter's next week, I think, right? And because eggs are still so expensive, some people are making Easter potatoes instead of. I don't know if that would work quite the same. But in Idaho, plenty of potatoes. Yeah, so there's probably different emotions coming up, but in Buddhism, we usually consider anger to be particularly something to be concerned about because it can be very harmful if we don't know how to manage it. we can't control it, then it can cause a lot of suffering, a lot of problems, both for ourselves and for others and for the world. And so, yeah, we'll start working on this book. Venerable Chodron normally gives the talk at these Sharing the Dharma days, but she's in Europe right now doing a 1-month teaching tour. So I'll do this month, and then she'll be back next month and continue. So I'll just read through the book, starting with chapter 1 and pausing every so often to maybe explain things a little more. And I'll try to leave some time at the end for questions, if you have any questions. So Venerable Chodron is the author of this book, and the author of many books, and it's available in the Book Nook if you want to get your own copy. Okay, so chapter 1 is called Mind, Emotion, and Anger. One summer, His Holiness the Dalai Lama spoke to a Los Angeles audience that included a group of inner city youth in fatigues, their camp uniforms, together with their counselors. After his talk, one of the youths asked His Holiness, "People get right in my face and provoke me. How can I not fight back?" She was challenging him, but quite sincere in her request. His Holiness looked her in the eye and said, "Violence is old-fashioned. Anger doesn't get you anywhere. If you can calm your mind and be patient, you will be a wonderful example to those around you." The audience clapped, but the girl remained standing, looking back at him. She wasn't yet satisfied. The Dalai Lama went on to describe how so many great people, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, and Jesus, for example, remained peaceful in the face of violence and adversity. Many of them experienced difficulties when they were growing up. Even me, he said, my youth was fraught with conflict and violence. Well, it was when he was still quite young that the Chinese communists entered Tibet with their huge army and overpowered the tiny Tibetan army. And yeah, there was quite a bit of fighting and killing and disaster that His Holiness had to deal with. He was still a teenager, I think, at that time. Yet all of these people expounded nonviolence and love for others, and the world is better for their contributions. It's possible for you to do this too. He then motioned for the girl to come up and shake his hand. As she approached him with her hand outstretched and a nervous smile on her face, the Dalai Lama opened his arms and hugged her. The girl returned to her seat, beaming. After the talk, one of the sponsors asked the teenagers if they would share their experience. A burly, tough-looking young man came to the microphone with a huge smile on his face. "Phew," he said, "you must be able to hear my heart beating from where you're sitting. I've seen the Dalai Lama on TV and in the magazines and thought he was pretty cool, but I just can't describe what it feels like to have met him." And he touched his heart. A Tibetan monk who had escaped from communist-occupied Tibet just a few years earlier told me his story. His family was a wealthy, prominent one in the area of Tibet where he grew up. After the communist occupation of Tibet in 1950 and the subsequent abortive uprising in 1959, his family's house was confiscated and made into a jail. Because his family were landowners and because he was a monk, he was arrested by the Chinese communists. Then he was imprisoned in a jail that had once been his home. He and the other inmates were allowed to go to the toilet outdoors twice a day, but otherwise they had to stay in the house, which now had broken windows and none of its former comforts. Most people would have burned with rage at the injustice and humiliation, but this monk told me that he tried to use his time wisely, doing his meditation practices to improve the state of his mind. Although he was deprived of all his religious implements, he silently recited the texts he had memorized and contemplated their meanings. In this way, he familiarized his mind with attitudes and emotions that lead to enlightenment and avoided the pitfalls of anger. When I talked with him, I detected no sign of resentment against the Chinese communists. He had a profound love of life. Stories such as these lead us to wonder, how do they do it? They are human beings just like us, and although they have faced circumstances much worse than a great many of us have faced, including exile, imprisonment, torture, and the loss of many loved ones, they do not burn with rage or seek revenge. This book is largely a collection of Buddhist methods for subduing and preventing anger that have worked for the Dalai Lama, the monk above, and many others. There is nothing particularly Buddhist about these methods. In fact, many of the Buddhist teachings are common sense, not religious doctrine. And common sense is not the property of any religion. Rather, these methods show us reasonable and beneficial ways to live. No matter what our religion, looking at our minds and learning to work with our anger are helpful. Yes, for me personally, one of the things that really drew me to Buddhism and kept me into Buddhism was that there's so many really practical tools or methods for working on the mind. Because I grew up in California and my family was Catholic, so we went to church every Sunday and I went to Catholic school, and there's always stories about the saints, the Catholic saints, and the idea is these are role models for you to follow. And when I was very young, I aspired to be saintly. But it soon became clear that I wasn't. I had a lot of the opposite qualities like anger and rebelliousness and selfishness and so on. So I became quite discouraged. And yeah, there didn't seem to be any methods like how to become saintly if you're not kind of naturally born like that, how to deal with your anger. And so then when I started learning Buddhism, I was around the age of 20 when I went to India and started learning Buddhism. I was really happy to discover there's, not only does Buddhism tell you, don't be angry, be kind and patient, but they tell you how to do it, how you can change yourself if you're not naturally like that. And so what I find is that, these methods actually do work if you apply them. So I can see big changes in myself from having applied these methods. And a lot of the methods don't require belief in Buddhist ideas, but they're just sort of common sense. Some of them are. Some of them you would require understanding and accepting certain Buddhist ideas, but a lot of them are just common sense. So one nice thing is that there are lots of different methods for working with anger and other emotions, and you can pick and choose. You don't have to use all of them. So if you find some methods, that doesn't work for me. But hopefully you'll find others that do, that you can accept and use and find helpful. Buddhism has been called a science of the mind, and many of those who practice it say the Buddha was similar to a great therapist who taught practical methods for dealing with disturbing attitudes, negative emotions, and daily life problems. Buddhism, of course, goes beyond the scope of psychotherapy and differs from it in some significant ways. Nevertheless, like psychology, it deals with the human mind and emotions and strives to create happier human beings and a better society. Although we may wish to immediately dive into the practical applications for anger management, these are presented within the context of a Buddhist view of mind and emotions. Thus, some background on this topic will help us understand them. So next there's a section entitled The Buddhist Perspective on Mind and Emotions. The term mind refers to the experiential, cognitive, intellectual, perceptual, and feeling part of us. It is non-material in nature, while our body, made of atoms, is material. So this is one difference between the Buddhist notion of mind and what other people may understand by mind. In Buddhism, mind is something non-material, non-physical. So it's not part of the body. It's not like our brain or any other part of the body that's made of material substances like molecules and atoms, cells, and so on. So mind is totally non-material, non-physical. That means we can't see it, yeah? If you dissect the body, dissect the brain, you're not going to find the mind anywhere. It's invisible, intangible. But we can know the mind using mind itself, right? So we do have this capacity for being aware, and that itself is the mind. And so in Buddhism, we use our mind to observe our mind, to watch our mind, to watch what kind of thoughts do I have, what kind of feelings do I have. So that's the sort of science of mind. Mind itself is the instrument with which we examine our mind and understand our mind and change our mind. Yeah, that's the real point, is to work on our mind and bring about positive, constructive changes to it. Within the broad category of mind, we find many types of mind. So mind isn't just like one singular thing, but it's actually a complex of many different kinds of experiences, and they're coming and going all the time, arising and passing, arising and passing. It's a bit like a river or a stream that's always moving and flowing and changing, different experiences happening every moment. And that's what we call mind. It's like that. Mind is like the term for this whole flow of experiences. Okay, so among the many types of mind are sense consciousnesses, which perceive external objects such as sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touches. So sense consciousness is like seeing, hearing, sound, smell, taste, and body consciousness, feeling sensations in our body. So those are one type of mind that are called sense consciousnesses or perceptions. But then there's also mental consciousness. That's another part of our mind, which is different than our sense consciousnesses. And that thinks, dreams, sleeps, and can experience spiritual realizations. So whenever we have thoughts or memories or emotions or dreams at night, so those kinds of experiences are what we call mental consciousness. It's different than our sense consciousness. It's like seeing, so they're more internal. Anger, like all emotions, is a type of mind. So anger is included within the mind. it is a mental factor that accompanies our conceptual mental consciousness. So part of our mental consciousness includes conceptions or thoughts. Like when we think, like right now, maybe you're thinking about what I'm saying, having thoughts about it, or maybe you're thinking about something else unrelated to what we're doing here. That often happens. Yeah, so all those kinds of thoughts are mental consciousness, and they're called conceptual mental consciousness. They're concepts. So mind is included in, anger is included in that. It's part of our conceptual consciousness. And because of that, it can be affected, either subdued or inflamed at the mental level. So what that means is, because our mind is part of the conceptual consciousness, anger is part of our conceptual consciousness, it's related to thoughts. And so we can use our thoughts to work on our anger, right? So like, anger gets triggered off. You see something or hear something and anger comes up. But working with thoughts, changing thoughts, you can change your emotions. Instead of getting more angry, you can subdue your anger. So that's what we try to do in Buddhism. Patience, love, compassion, and joy are similarly mental factors that accompany our mental consciousness, albeit not at the same time as anger. So we have certain states of mind that are positive. We talk about positive and negative within Buddhism. So positive usually means conducive for happiness and good experiences for ourselves and others. So those would, positive states of mind would be things like patience, love, compassion, and joy. Those are positive. They feel good. They make us happy, and they also help other people. And anger, on the other hand, is included in what's sometimes called negative emotions, negative states of mind. And that's because it doesn't make us feel good. It makes us feel lousy and can also be harmful to others. So it usually leads to harmful, problematic consequences rather than good ones. So we have like a whole variety of different kinds of what we normally call emotions, but in Buddhism these are called mental factors. And some are more positive, some are more negative. And we can work on them, we can change them. We can either increase them, like that's what we want to do with the positive states of mind, like love and compassion, or we can decrease them, like the negative, disturbing ones, like anger, we want to decrease. So all these mental factors can be enhanced or diminished at the mental level. For this reason, the Buddha emphasized that our mind is the source of our suffering and happiness. So this is a big teaching in Buddhism. A normal question that people wonder and ask is, where does happiness come from? Where does suffering come from? Why is this person so happy and I'm so unhappy, or vice versa? So we always try to find reasons or objects outside of ourselves to blame or thank for our experiences of happiness, unhappiness, and so on. And those certainly can affect us. They can be conditions for being unhappy or happy. But Buddhism says the main source of our feelings like being happy or unhappy is our own mind. And just to give an example of that, let's just say there's a traffic jam, and so there's a whole lot of people in their cars stuck in this traffic jam. And some people might be feeling, quite unhappy, even angry. Some people in this country have what they call road rage. Yeah, they actually turn violent in those kind of situations. So that's a common experience, is to be angry when you're stuck in a traffic jam, or just unhappy, impatient, and so on. But it's also possible for somebody to be in a traffic jam and not get angry. Like maybe a meditator, someone who knows about meditation, and so they're using the situation to practice mindfulness, to cultivate loving kindness and compassion for the other people who are stuck in the traffic jam, or maybe they're saying prayers, or they're listening to a podcast or an audiobook, and so they're doing something to help their mind stay calm and peaceful, and they may even be enjoying themselves instead of angry and impatient. So that shows that it's not so much the external situation, like the traffic jam, that is the cause of people's happiness or unhappiness, but rather it's what's going on in their mind. Yeah, their internal thoughts and feelings and experiences. Yeah, so we can learn ways of keeping our mind calm and even positive, even happy in situations where other people might be feeling very unhappy and even angry. So it's all a question of what we do with our mind. That's why Buddhism says mind. The mind is the main source, the main cause for our experiences of suffering as well as happiness. And then she continues, the word mind may also be translated as heart, as in that person has a kind heart. Here we see that Buddhism does not make the same distinction between thinking and feeling that we make in the West, where we believe that thought is conceptual and emotions are not. So there's this tendency, I'm not sure where it started, but in the West, there's often this distinction made between thoughts and feelings, like intellectual thoughts, conceptual thoughts, and then feelings and emotions, like as if these are two totally different things, totally separate. So that's not the case in Buddhism. Rather, they're all parts of our mind. They're all within the mind. And emotions like anger, as well as joy, love, and so on, these are involved with conceptions. Not necessarily deliberate thought, yeah, but they're conceptual in the sense that they are part of the mental consciousness and not part of our sense consciousnesses like seeing, hearing, and so on. So they're all included within the mental consciousness. Indeed, Sanskrit, Pali, and Tibetan, all languages in which Buddhist texts are written, have no word which is a direct translation of emotion. So in the classical languages that were used for Buddhist scriptures, they don't have a word for emotion. They don't regard emotion as something distinct. They're just what we call emotions, like anger and joy and misery and so on. These are all just aspects of the mind, some of which are positive and constructive, others are negative. They don't make that strong separation between mind and emotion, or thought and emotion. From a Buddhist perspective, many emotions, such as anger, have a feeling component but are conceptual, for they know their objects by means of a mental image. For example, we can be angry when the person at whom we are mad isn't even in the room. At that time, we are not perceiving the person with our eyes, but we are thinking about him, in that a mental image of him appears to our mind. So conceptual, when we talk about conceptual aspects of the mind, what that means is our mind is thinking about a person or an object, and that person or object could be far away, could be on the other side of the world, or maybe already passed away, but we can still think of that person, and our mind has kind of a mental image, right, like a mental picture of that person. And so we can think of that person, which means we're actually, experiencing a mental image of that person, and we can still get very emotional. Right? We all have that experience. You think of someone you know and love, and maybe they've passed away. Think of them, and you can feel very sad, or a lot of love, a lot of joy that you knew that person, and so on. Or someone we don't like, we can think of that person and get really worked up with anger. So that's what happens with conceptual experiences. We can be sitting in one place and thinking about someone or something that's far, far away, and it's almost as if that person or object is right there in front of us, and we can get all emotional about it. So that's just explaining some of the aspects of what we call conception in Buddhism. But the study of mind, it's a huge, vast subject and very complex. So this is just giving a few little bits of the Buddhist view of mind, but it's really complex and very, very fascinating, very interesting. So that's just kind of an introduction to mind. And now she'll go on to talk about anger. So the next section is, what is anger? In Buddhism, anger is a mental factor that, being unable to bear a person, object, situation, or idea, harbors ill will towards it or wishes to harm it. So whenever we get angry, there's always an object of our anger, and it could be a person, a human being, or another kind of being, an animal, an insect, a bird. It could also be something inanimate. Yeah? Have you ever gotten angry at your phone, or your computer, or your car, or the weather? Okay. So just about anything could be an object of our anger, but probably most of the time it's a person, it's a living being, right? That's my experience anyway. So, but anyway, the point is there's always an object. And so when anger arises, it's referring to that object, and it has a sense of ill will. And when it's really fully developed, there's even this wish to do something harmful. The strongest form of anger is actually wanting to harm. So it's like totally opposite to love, right? Love is when we view another person with good feelings. Yeah, we like them, we care about them. We want them to be happy, we want them to do well, we want them to have whatever they need, food, comfort, safety. So we care for them. Okay, that's the feeling of love. And anger is just the opposite to that. We don't like that person. We don't want them to be happy. We may even want them to suffer. We may even want to make them suffer if it's really strong, right? We want to do something to make them suffer or disturb their happiness. Or it could also be just shutting them out of our love, like closing our heart to them. I'm not going to be nice to you. I'm not going to even look at you. I'm not going to talk to you. So that's kind of one way of harming them, just not being nice to them, not giving them our love. So that's what's usually involved with anger. Anger covers a range of emotions, including annoyance, irritation, frustration, spite, belligerence, resentment, hatred, and rage. So there's like a whole range of emotions, yeah? Starting from something mild like irritation or aversion or dislike, just a feeling of, oh, I don't like that person, or I don't like that sound, or whatever. That's pretty low level. But it's still anger, yeah? It's still like a low level form of anger. And then, it can get stronger. Things like frustration, and then at the other end is hatred and rage and maybe even aggressiveness when it's really strong. We feel like we've got to do something destructive, harmful. So, all of those different emotions are forms of anger. Although the English word anger may very occasionally be used in a positive sense, here, as one of the root disturbing emotions, it has only a negative meaning. So in Buddhism, anger is considered one of the main causes of suffering, one of the mental states that creates the suffering problems for ourselves and for others, both in an immediate sense, like as soon as we feel angry, it has adverse effects on our body and mind, but it can also have more long-term effects, later down the line. So it's considered something harmful, destructive, negative, something we want to overcome. And then she starts talking about where anger comes from, or how it arises. The forerunner to anger is a mental factor called inappropriate attention that, in this case, exaggerates the negative qualities of a person, object, situation, or idea, and projects onto it negative qualities that are not there, thus creating an incorrect story about it. And she gives an example. For example, Dave walks into the office one morning and his colleague, who is preoccupied, doesn't greet him. He thinks, this person is unfriendly and rude, and based on this inappropriate attention that projected meaning and motivation onto the other's action, he becomes irritated. His internal irritation leads to external action, and Dave makes a sarcastic remark which hurts his colleague, and she in turn snaps back at him. We can easily see how one instant of inappropriate attention and anger can set off a chain reaction of events, causing ourselves and others misery. So there's sort of a evolution of anger. We first perceive an object like a person, and depending on other factors, like maybe previous experiences we've had with that person, or what the person is doing at that moment, like in this example, this person is ignoring me, not saying anything to me. And so then that can precipitate thoughts like, oh, what a rude person, she doesn't like me, or whatever. So there's these thoughts, and those kind of exaggerate the situation, create a story, which probably isn't true. It's often not true. And based on that story, believing in that story, then anger arises. And that may precipitate an action, like in this case, making a sarcastic remark. So there's things that happen prior to anger arising in our mind. And one of those things is what's called inappropriate attention, which means our mind is not dealing with that object in a correct way, in a realistic way, but there's exaggeration, there's storytelling, which may not be true. There's always a certain amount of exaggeration. In fact, the Dalai Lama tells a story that he once met an American psychologist, Aaron Beck, who had done a lot of research into anger and hatred. And this psychologist said to the Dalai Lama, when we're angry, when we have anger or hatred towards another person, we see that person as 100% negative, 100% bad. 90% of that is our own projection. And the Dalai Lama said he was very happy to hear that, because this is what Buddhism says as well. There's a huge amount of projection, exaggeration on to whoever or whatever we're angry at. It's like our mind is making up stories about that person. Some of it might be true, right? There may be some not so good things there, but on top of that, our mind is adding a lot more. And then we eventually come to see that person is 100% negative. So it takes some mindfulness, looking at the mind, being able to step back and look at the mind objectively to be able to see this happening. But if you can, it's very helpful, very insightful into the workings of our mind. At a meeting of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Western scientists to discuss destructive emotions, I learned that scientists in general delineate 3 components of emotions: the feeling, the physiological, and the behavioral. For them, the meaning of anger then includes not simply a feeling, but also the physiological activation of particular areas in the brain and the release of certain hormones in the body. Something happening in our brain and also in our body. In addition, it includes the behavior, such as shouting or sulking, that accompanies a particular instance of anger. Buddhists, however, refer primarily to the feeling component when they speak of emotions such as anger or compassion. Buddhist texts contain little discussion of the brain or of hormones, probably because the scientific instruments for detecting their functions are recent developments. Anger is related to the body, to the energy in our body, as well as to the hormones such as adrenaline, which influence it. But anger itself is not a physical state. So there's a connection between our body, like our brain, our hormones, and so on, and our mind. They do affect each other. They are interdependent, but anger itself is not part of the body. It's not a physical thing. So it is a mental state, although some people first know they are angry by recognizing physical indications such as muscle tension or a churning stomach. So sometimes, because the mind is subtle, we may not always recognize that we're angry. But if we can feel tight, tension, or our stomach is churning, then those are like physical signs that there's anger going on in the mind, but those themselves are not anger. Also, for Buddhists, the meaning of anger or other emotions does not include the behavior that accompanies a particular instance of the emotion. I'll just read one more section. So this is negative emotions and freedom from them. Western culture and Buddhism have varying meanings for negative emotion and positive emotion. For Westerners, negative emotions are ones that feel bad, and positive emotions are ones that feel good. Sadness, for example, is a negative emotion because the person feels deflated, whereas attachment to a beautiful house is a positive emotion because the person feels happy. From a Buddhist viewpoint, however, the distinction between positive and negative emotions depends on whether they lead to cyclic existence or to liberation. So these are Buddhist concepts. Cyclic existence, the Sanskrit term is samsara, is the constant recurrence of the problems we face from one life to the next as a result of our fundamental ignorance. Liberation is freedom from this, a state of lasting happiness. So according to Buddhism, we ordinary people, ordinary beings are in this situation called samsara or cyclic existence. And it basically means our mind is not free from afflictive emotions like anger and also attachment and jealousy and arrogance, and ignorance. Ignorance means not understanding how things really are. So we're like confused about the real nature of things. So our mind is sort of caught up in these afflictive, disturbing thoughts and emotions. And because of that, we aren't really free from problems and suffering, but we keep experiencing problems and suffering again and again in this life, but also from life to life. Buddhism talks about rebirth, reincarnation. So from life to life, we continue to experience problems because of these afflictive emotions. And then that's samsara. And then liberation, also called nirvana, is a state of being free from problems and suffering because of being free from afflictive emotions. So it's possible to work on the mind and gradually reduce the afflictive emotions and eventually get rid of them altogether so they're no longer there. And when we're able to do that, then that's the meaning of nirvana or liberation. No more suffering, no more problems. So what she's saying here is the way to distinguish positive emotions and negative emotions is more, do they perpetuate our suffering, our situation in samsara, or do they lead to liberation from that situation? So that's how we determine if an emotion is positive or negative. So she says, thus, certain types of sadness may be positive. For example, the sadness we feel when we realize that sense objects cannot bring us lasting happiness. So food, for example, probably starting to get hungry now. It's getting close to lunchtime. So we usually, get pretty excited about food and have a lot of attachment to food. And when we have attachment, it's almost like we think that is bringing us real happiness, lasting, genuine happiness. But it doesn't really. It just gives a little bit of pleasure for a while, but sooner or later that fades. And then after a few hours, we're hungry again. So it doesn't really satisfy us and lead to real, genuine happiness. So when we hear about that and we start thinking about that and realize that, we may feel some sadness. It's like, being let down by something we thought was so wonderful and so fantastic. So there could be sadness, kind of disillusionment, disenchantment with something we used to be so excited about. But she's saying that kind of sadness is positive, because being disillusioned with something that cannot bring lasting happiness leads us to generate the determination to be free from cyclic existence and attain liberation. So that's why, like those of us wearing these robes, we've decided to choose this lifestyle where we're, less involved with ordinary sense objects and putting more of our time and energy into meditation and practices to work on our mind, overcome our afflictive emotions, and work for these higher states of mind like nirvana. On the other hand, although it may feel good, a clinging attachment to possessions, such as our house, is considered harmful because it keeps us tied to samsara, cyclic existence. With such attachment, we repeatedly seek happiness from external sources, people and things that, just like us, are transient and therefore unable to provide us with enduring happiness. Buddhism teaches methods for subduing destructive emotions, those that keep us in cyclic existence, and methods for developing constructive emotions, those that lead us to liberation. So there's kind of a lot there in that paragraph, but this is just pointing out the difference between the way like Western psychology and Buddhism look at emotions and divide them between those that are positive and those that are negative. Now, what Western psychology might consider a positive emotion, Buddhism might not. And what Buddhism might consider, what Western psychology might consider a negative emotion, Buddhism may not, because they have different criteria. Yeah. In Western psychology, it's more like your immediate, what kind of immediate effect it has on you. Whereas in Buddhism, it's more like the long-term result, whether it keeps us in a state of confusion and suffering and problems, or it helps us get liberated from that. But I think in some, there would be agreement on certain emotions, like anger. I think both sides would agree that anger is something harmful and destructive because it harms us. There's an immediate effect, even physically, on our body, on our health. Anger is harmful, and it also disturbs our mind. So anger and hatred, I think, would be on the list of negative emotions for both sides. And love, the opposite of anger, would be on the list of positive emotions for both sides, because the immediate effect is it makes us feel good, it makes the people around us feel good, it's good for us physically. They've done research on kindness, which is related to love, caring about others and wanting to help them. And they find that, there's a lot of benefits from being kind that can be experienced just here and now on our health, our stress level, our ability to relate to others and get along with others and so on. So there would be some agreement on, on certain emotions, both on the Western side and the Buddhist side, but others would be different. So maybe I'll just stop there and give you a chance to ask questions, if you have any questions about anything that came up here.
So I have heard before from Venerable, there is no righteous anger, right? Even though I heard that many times, I found difficult, I don't know how to understand, and I may not be able ever to understand, is how even someone with power of a position to hurt someone else, they don't even know this purple, how they can do that, how someone can come as a police agent or an officer of border patrol can be so hateful and hurtful to someone they don't really know, because they don't know. Even if you know information about someone by paper, you don't know these people, and how not to be angry with the actions they do, even if it is your job, right? It's how understand that without getting a reaction from it. It's pretty difficult. So I choose to ignore, but that's also wrong, because ignoring something, it doesn't make it any better, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know how to balance, where to find balance there.
Yeah, this is a big question, and I think there's a lot of discussion about it in Buddhist circles and with the Dalai Lama. And there's actually one book called Beyond Religion that is by the Dalai Lama, and there's a whole chapter in there about emotions, destructive emotions. And he says that, I can't remember the exact words, but some emotions like anger are not always destructive. Sometimes they're related, like anger can be related to compassion, like the example you're giving, somebody in a position of power harming somebody else and not showing much compassion. So there's lots of that going on, and it's just natural, yeah? We care about those who are being harmed. We don't want them to be harmed, yeah? And so it's natural, I think normal for anger to come up. And it's related to compassion for the victims, those who are being harmed. So I think this is what the Dalai Lama is talking about, that this isn't necessarily destructive. It depends on what we do with it. I mean, if we go and hit the person, do something violent and aggressive, then that's not good. But, there's many cases of anger over injustice stirring people to act. Yeah, like, I have to do something about this. I can't just ignore it, and I can't just, not do something. And so activism, a lot of activism, social activism, which can be very beneficial, very helpful, to save those who are being harmed, often starts off with anger. But the tricky thing is, and this would be the Buddhist view, so, the initial spark for that kind of activism would be anger, but then you don't want to remain angry. If you remain angry, then that can influence what you do, what you say, what you think, and you might end up doing something harmful or negative. So if you can, change the anger into compassionate action using intelligence. Okay, there's this situation. I'm not happy about it. It's harmful. What can I do about it? So you find others who feel the same way. You form a group. You do political action. You write to representatives. You try to find some positive, constructive ways of bringing about change. And often that works. There are lots of cases where that can be effective. Whereas, just getting angry and then acting in an angry way sometimes just makes things worse, right? You get yourself into trouble, you get other people into trouble. Yeah. So that would be the ideal in Buddhism, is to, replace anger with compassion and with intelligence. Thinking wisely, skillfully, what can be done about this, and then put your energy into that. And try not to let anger remain in your mind. It's hard, but because anger has that aspect of wanting to harm, wanting to do something harmful to those who are themselves harming. And it's like they say, fighting fire with fire. It usually doesn't lead to anything beneficial, just leads to more suffering and problems. So that becomes more clear. Like, what are the problems coming from anger? And if we can see those, then, even in situations where it may seem like righteous anger, we're right to be angry, but we'll think, no, and I don't want to go down that path. I don't want to follow that road of just being angry and acting in an angry way. Let's look for another road. There are other roads. There are other avenues we can take that are probably more skillful, more effective, more helpful, feel better for ourselves and for others, and not so harmful, destructive. So it takes time to learn those other ways, but if we do get acquainted with them, get familiar with them, then they start to get easier and easier. And does that make sense? So the Dalai Lama says things like that. I think, like that book I mentioned, Beyond Religion, I think the intended audience is more secular, like general audience, not a specifically Buddhist audience. And this is what Venerable Chodron says, when His Holiness is talking to a Buddhist audience, then he speaks differently. He says anger is very harmful. And so, like, for us, what we're aiming for higher states of mind, like enlightenment, liberation, being able to benefit others in a long-term sense. So if you're on that path, then anger is something, it's not only harmful and destructive, but it's also an obstacle. It's a big obstacle to developing real love, real compassion for everybody, including those who do harm. So they deserve compassion too. They deserve love too. And so as long as we're hanging on to anger towards people like that, then our love and our compassion won't be fully developed, fully perfected. So if this is the path we're following, then eventually we do want to get beyond anger. So I think that's probably where Venerable Chodron is coming from when she makes those comments. But we're just ordinary people. Like right now, we're not highly evolved, and we do still feel angry. Anger gets sparked, and so then it's just a question of, okay, when it does come up in our minds, it's understandable, it's natural, but what are we going to do with this? Do we want to follow it and feed it and go down the anger road, or do we want to work on it, transform our mind into something more positive and constructive? Let's look at how we can do that. So we always have a choice. There's a choice. We don't always have a choice about what comes up in our mind, what pops up suddenly, but we do have a choice about what we're going to do with that. Yeah? Where we're going to take that. Does that make sense? It's a good question. Very, very, and like I say, there's a lot of discussion about this, a lot of different ideas about it. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm curious about your thoughts about the relationship between fear and anger.
Yeah. Yeah, Buddhism, there's not a whole lot of discussion about fear in Buddhism as an emotion. But I get asked a lot about it a lot. And it does seem that, at least in some cases, there is a connection that anger can arise out of fear. People are afraid of something happening that they anticipate, and then they get angry at whoever they think might bring that about. And so, yeah, is that what you're referring to? Yes, yeah. So in many cases, if we look underneath the anger, behind the anger, what is going on in the mind, then we may discover fear. Also attachment. A lot of anger comes from attachment. I'm attached to this person or this object or this idea or this situation. I want it to be like that and stay like that and never change. And then anything that seems to be disrupting that or threatening that triggers anger. So anger and other emotions can often be connected, related.
Question online. Is anger like pain or other difficult emotions, in that it's an indication? It's not the feeling that is the problem, but what we do with it. We can't help the anger, but we can choose how we address it.
Yeah, that's what I just said in response to Ida's question, that we don't necessarily have control of our mind and be able to never get angry, but once it does arise, then we have a choice of where to take it from there. Yeah. Tracy?
I often feel
Wait.
Wait for the mic so the online audience can hear you. Thank you.
I often feel I can go between anger and sadness because there's usually some kind of loss or disappointment, or is it more wholesome to try to stay in this sense of sadness? Is it less bad karma than really thinking angry, harmful thoughts? And just recognizing that sense of loss or disappointment or sadness for what's happening for others.
Yeah, sadness isn't necessarily something negative. Yeah, if we're sad about what's happening in Gaza, for example, we hear all these horrific stories of what's going on there, and sad for those people and all the suffering they've been through, then that's not like anger. Anger is like, those blankety blank, and yeah. So sadness, but then, it's not too helpful to just get stuck in sadness, because that can mean like a sense of hopelessness and helplessness and despair, like there's nothing I can do. So it's still better to get out of that and to think like, okay, what can I do about that situation? I'm sad about it. Is there anything I can do? And if there is something I can do, there may not be anything we can do in a practical sense to actually change what's going on out there, but we can always do something in a spiritual sense. Yeah, pray, meditate, dedicate, work on our mind and dedicate the positive energy. So in a spiritual sense, there's always something we can do, and that will help us not get stuck in a sense of sad hopelessness and despair. Dan.
I was just wondering if you could speak about, or what your thoughts were on like this notion that as a Buddhist, I shouldn't get angry. So yeah. So because there's this balance between like, I feel like maybe giving myself a break, but also not making excuses. You know, there's this line. But yeah, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I mean, where does that come from? Does that come from outside or your own mind? Yeah, I mean, it's easy to think that way. Like we look at images of the Buddha, you know, and he's always looking so serene and peaceful. We hear stories about the Buddha and about the Dalai Lama. I mean, even the Dalai Lama, you know, he says he gets angry sometimes. I was very not happy to hear that, but it relieved. It was a relief to hear that even the Dalai Lama feels angry sometimes. So, you know, there's a difference between being a Buddhist and being a Buddha. Okay, being a Buddhist is we're trying to become a Buddha. We're trying to become like the Buddha, but we're not there yet. And so we do have to have compassion for ourselves and be realistic. You know, it really takes a long time to bring about a transformation of the mind and no longer have these emotions popping up.
Couldn't that also be a crutch if you keep saying, like, for me, like, so if I just say, like, okay, I get the part, have compassion, give ourselves a break, we're not Buddhas yet, but like, if I keep saying that and I keep doing something, then it's not really like.
Well, are you doing something about it? That's the question.
Yeah,
okay, so anger pops up, and then what do? You just, you know, go for a walk and not do anything about your anger? That may not be so helpful. So, I mean, at least give yourself credit if you're not acting it out like you may have done in the past. You know, give yourself credit for that. But, you know, just it's good to look at that and say, okay, there's still anger in my mind. You know, I still have work to do. What can I do? And, you know, put your energy into, you know, making sure you are working on your mind and not just, making excuses. Yeah, so we should probably stop there so we can get ready for lunch. But thank you for your questions. And what do? We usually dedicate. So we'll say some prayers to dedicate the merit, the positive energy of this session, sharing it with others, all living beings, wishing that it will bring happiness, peace, benefit to all beings and help them all be free of anger and other disturbing emotions.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Well, thank you so much, Venerable Sangye Khadro. If we'll take a moment to let Venerable take her leave before we have some announcements before lunch. And folks can return to your seats as we have a brief announcement from Selden, who is going to tell us a bit more about how the Abbey works.
Hopefully you're not angry because you're hungry right now. Venerable Chodron started this Abbey and has written, I don't know, 30 or more books. Not because she was trying to convert people to Buddhism or for money or fame, but because she really cares about people's suffering. And the Abbey, its main function is to train the monastics you see here in a very controlled and beneficial way. They hold their precepts, of lying, stealing, and other things very seriously, and but also to accept people here like us here, and to help us with our minds. And so everything you see here, the Buddha Hall, they're really close to finishing. This building, they started out with that house over there. And so people's kind donations from all over the world have led to all this. And the more they build, the more capacity they have to help people with their anger and their suffering. So I would like to, if you're so inclined, if you're motivated, and if you'd like to help out with this virtuous project, there's a donation box straight back there by the Kuan Yin statue. In the book nook, there's a donation box. Online on the main website page, there's a donation button. And if you do decide to donate, don't decide to donate because you think you should or you have to, but that you were inspired by this place.
Thank you. I never understand why you say they, Selden, because Selden is a lay resident. You are we. You're part of